Next tonight, a man from North Yorkshire who received contaminated blood 40 years ago says it's robbed him of his health, his livelihood and his chances of having children. Richard Warwick has welcomed the government's decision to give compensation to many of those affected by the blood scandal, but says it doesn't go far enough. So let's look at the background. It's been called the biggest treatment disaster in NHS history. Thousands of patients became seriously ill after they were infected with contaminated blood in the 1970s and 80s. Many went on to die. After years of lobbying, victims of the scandal have learnt they'll receive interim payments in compensation. The government says it intends to pay £100,000 to those who've been infected and to bereaved partners. They should receive this by the end of October in England. This could just be the first stage, as the public inquiry is looking into whether more payouts should be given to a greater number of people. Our health correspondent Jamie Coulson has Richard's story.
It's defined my life. Everything I do day to day has been defined by the infections that I've been given over the past 40 years. The scandal has defined my existence.
Richard Warwick was born with Haemophilia, a rare disorder that affects the blood's ability to clot. In 1976, he went to Trelawn's College in Hampshire, where he was given a new treatment called Factor VIII, a clotting agent made by pooling human blood plasma. At the time, some was imported from the United States, where high-risk groups such as prisoners were among the donors. Richard later discovered he'd been infected with viruses including HIV and hepatitis C.
It's prevented me having any life opportunities at all. I haven't been able to do anything that I would wish to do. Haven't been able to raise a family with my wife. Haven't been able to have a career. I've known nothing other than what I've lived with for 40 years.
I've decided to recommend the interim payments of no less than £100,000.
Last month, the chair of the Infected Blood Inquiry made a recommendation that interim compensation of £100,000 be paid to victims and bereaved partners. Today, the government announced it would meet those recommendations in full, with payments made to those enrolled in support schemes in England by the end of October. The same amount will be made available in the rest of the UK.
It's a start. It's the beginning of the road to the end. These are interim payments, and they will help people that are currently ill, to get their affairs in order. But it's disappointing that parents that have lost children and children that have lost parents are not included in this recommendation.
This is just the first stage of compensation payments in what has been dubbed the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. And for Richard, it also brings some recognition of the harm that was done. Jamie Coulson, BBC Look North.
Well, earlier I spoke to Clive Smith, who chairs the Haemophilia Society, and I asked him for his reaction to this new compensation payment.
It doesn't go far enough because family members, the bereaved, parents who had children who died and children who had parents who died are not covered in any way, shape or form by today's announcement. And indeed, it looks like they will have to wait at least until the end of the inquiry, which is expected to be the middle of next year now.
You've been campaigning for this for years. How do you feel about the fact that it's taken this long to get this far?
Angry, frustrated and exhausted, I think is the best way of describing it. But today is significant because for the first time we're actually talking about compensation. In the past, there have been support payments made by government to those who've been infected, but it's always been on a no-fault basis. They've never accepted liability. I think many people feel now that government are paying what they refer to as compensation is a tacit acknowledgement that government did something wrong, that this wasn't inevitable, that it could have been avoided, and it didn't have to happen.
And what's your message to the government then, and what more would you like to see them do?
Very simply, get on with it. This recommendation for interim compensation has come from the government's own compensation study, which had 19 recommendations. It's now been published and we still don't have government's response. So we don't know where government stands on the other 18 recommendations on it. So my message to government is get on with it, please. More people are dying now.
Clive Smith, thank you.